Hi, I'm Tina Govan of Placemaking Studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm an architect turned placemaker, but I think all good architects are placemakers too, making places, not just buildings. So I think it's worth asking, how do buildings encourage or discourage placemaking? How do they connect us with each other, with the street, and with the life outside, especially since COVID has pushed us all outside for health reasons and for social ones? Working with Placemaking US and the Social Life Project, I'd like to offer a few short conversations on the theme of inviting the inside out. And to start, here's Jaime Azareta, who focuses on the design of storefronts in his new guide, The Storefront Mastery Playbook.
The storefront, the actual facade, the actual commercial facade that they have towards the street is kind of a threshold. And when that threshold is very, very hard, the city is also very, very hard. When that threshold is soft, to use Jan Gehl's word of the soft city, when that threshold is soft, it kind of spills out to the street. Whatever activities are being held inside these non-residential spaces, they spill out over to the street, and also the street can spill over to inside to this semi-public space, which are the non-residential spaces. So by looking at how the design of the storefronts is affecting the quality of the public space, I started to think, so what if there is a way for whoever is managing those small spaces, what if there is a way for them to spill over to the street and make it consciously, so that whatever efforts they put on their piece of sidewalk spill over to the rest of the street and spill over to the neighborhood when they are added or multiplied by the others who do the same. So there started the storefront placemaker idea of helping the storefront owners to create better pieces of sidewalk that connect to the rest of the block and to the rest of the neighborhood.
I think that's really interesting because it is very similar to what happens in neighborhoods in, like where I live, where there's porches. And so when you have that in-between space, when you don't have this harsh boundary between inside and outside, so this storefront really becomes a zone with dimension. Correct. Then you have that in-between exchange between in and out and public and private. So I think a lot of the same dynamics happen in the commercial world as the residential world. So the parallels are really strong.
I think it's exactly like you say. The porches are these in-between areas where people can receive visitors, where people can interact very, very strongly with their neighborhood. And it happens the same. It becomes multidimensional, which is a very interesting thing that you just said. It becomes multidimensional, and it becomes a place, not just a facade that would be otherwise just two-dimensional.
Right. It's not just like a weather boundary.
Correct.
And you can be on that edge. And I think that's what's really wonderful, is that space has this quality of inside and out and public and private. And so one energizes the other, and it gives people so much more choice. So the store becomes more accessible to the outside, and so people don't have to necessarily go inside and be committed to buying something. They can sort of feel it on the outside and walk by and get a taste of it. In the same way, that happens in residential neighborhoods where, you can be sitting on your porch and you can wave at a passing neighbor, but you don't have to invite them in for dinner. So it gives you that sort of choice of how to engage your environment and the people around you. And like you say, I think that makes it for a softer kind of city where you can move more easily between realms.
It's a buffer for the interaction. It's a waiting room for the interaction that sometimes it needs to take place inside, but many times it doesn't, and it becomes a neighborhood hangout, which is very, very interesting.
When we talk about the storefront going beyond just a 2D plane and becoming a zone and becoming a room, and then spreading down the street and starting this whole movement. If you take that even a step further, you can see of it it as like pieces of the building that escape outside and run down the street or run around town. So this idea of, you know, mobile carts and food carts, and they interact with the space differently because they can go anywhere. But they can also, even independent of a brick and mortar shop, can be incubators for people who are trying to start their own businesses. And so I think that idea again makes business more accessible to more people to start a business, but also makes the products more accessible to more people. Because again, you don't have to go into a restaurant or go into a store, sit down, have a reservation, pay a tip and all of that to eat inside. You can grab something on the street, or you can try something out, you know, via a cart or something. So I love that kind of introduction of another fine-grained option.
So these are allowing people who don't have much means to start up to become players in the market.
It's an opportunity for cities to really unleash that small scale, you know, and to empower it. So, you know, like in our city, we have, I think you're allowed to sell hot dogs on carts, but that's all. And so like if they would allow a range of things to happen on mobile carts around the city, that would open up all these possibilities for people. In fact, I have a friend who was working in a restaurant, and he got laid off because of COVID from his restaurant. And so now he started his own business by just doing a mobile food cart or setup of his own to try to kickstart his own business. And so it's a point of entry for him.
It's people who lost their jobs, but it's also just people like, it's just there's so little overhead with it, you know, like I feel like every day on Instagram, someone tells me to go follow some other thing. Like there's a pizza one. Yesterday I went to like a smash burger one. The one I went to yesterday is like once a week and it changes location. So you're kind of like, it's like when a band posts like, we're playing the secret show here. People just really like to be like in the know.
I'm an architect, so I've done some restaurants and cafes, but sometimes they're part of a big development where they say, no, you can't go out on the sidewalk, and everything has to be either, you know, orange, white, or black, or, you know, they name the color scheme. It's all, and so you don't get the sense of each business, which is what your storefront book addresses. So you don't see the sense of the life and the identity of each one of these businesses, and they aren't allowed to come out on the street. And you feel that missed opportunity, you know, and so that kind of diversity of life that you know is in every place.
Yes.
And to liberate that and enable it and ask it out, I think was what we really have to work towards. And when you travel, like you say, to other cities, you see that happening and you see that richness. Yes. And it makes you jealous. It makes me jealous. Like I want that here. And so
it's the curse of the big.
And it has to do with control, doesn't it? Like top-down control versus letting go and saying, I'm going to let people infill and express themselves within this at their own scale. So
yeah, especially in these days when the example of your friend who got laid off and is trying to start up with a cart. This is going to be the story of millions and millions of people this year. And we would be blind to not acknowledge that the real help that we need to give the people who are struggling because they are jobless right now because of COVID is looking at what are the barriers that we have put in place that forbid people from using their creativity to start something. But that, of course, it requires cities letting go some of the control that they have over the public space. Right. It would require them to accept some of the necessary chaos that will come when anybody is allowed to sell things other than hot dogs, for example, in your town.
Right. And who knows what could happen if you go beyond hot dogs.
Yeah, you don't know what could happen. But there are so many things that people can do within these broad guidelines that could make cities very lively and could potentially save thousands of people who are right now struggling to bring food to their table.
And I think this playbook is a great tool to help that recovery.
And I'm betting on the business owners' skills and knowledge to be able to create a better design.
Local businesses especially need this kind of support. I know that in my city that, dealing with how much you can go out on the sidewalk, how far, what you're allowed to do. I'm really hoping that eases up and that we learn from what's happening now, that the results are really much better. And we're helping not just the city and the street and the neighborhood, but the businesses themselves, and the town or city is really thriving much more. And this diversity in life is coming out. We need to work hand in hand with the city and the policies in place too. And I'm hoping they become soft in the same way that the storefront does.